Well, welcome to the third of our transition tales. Now, over the last year, many of us have perfected the Zoom goodbye, where we've just kept saying bye to the camera and waving at the screen as everyone else does the same.
Goodbye! 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 Enjoy yourself! Bye! Goodbye! Goodbye! Goodbye!
Now, there are times when you genuinely don't want to say goodbye, as we're missing so much contact at this time. But there are other times, let's be honest, when you're quite glad to get off the Zoom call or whatever you're using. You know, ending things properly is an important part of moving on. Now, we tend to see things in terms of starting and then finishing. So my CV, for example, will give a job and then the start and end date. But as I look back, my memories are about finishing one job and then starting a new one, because that's the time of transition, an ending and then a beginning. In our story of Joshua, the Israelites had their exit or exodus from Egypt and slavery. And in the book of Joshua, they're coming into the promised land. Again, an ending and a beginning, all part of the transition. You know, how we move on from something, or whether or not we move on, greatly affects how we move into the future. Now, I remember one situation where I wasn't able to properly say goodbye to those we were leaving. And what I missed wasn't someone saying to me how much they appreciated what I'd done whilst there, but I regretted not having the opportunity to properly say goodbye and to give my thanks and appreciation. And it took a long time to be able to properly move on because I'd been denied that opportunity. Saying goodbye in the right way and moving on is so important. Now, I wonder what your relationship to your past is like. Well, probably like mine, it's a bit of a mixture. Things I remember easily and others not so. Painful memories that can resurface with certain trigger points. And often these memories are indicators of unresolved issues. So how do we relate to our past? Well, one approach is to brush things under the carpet. And before I knew anything better, I think that's what I tended to do without thinking about it. But the trouble is, if you keep sweeping bad and painful stuff under the carpet, well, one day you'll trip over it. Now, one of the problems that I've had in the past is that in a couple of difficult situations, particularly where I've been hurt or disappointed, I've struggled to see God in it all. And have not felt very connected to God in those times. Now, your experience may be more positive, but for me, it's often been a time where both mentally and spiritually, I've not always been in the best of places. Now, the temptation when emerging from such times is to say good riddance and move on. And I guess that's perhaps how we might feel once lockdown ends. But I know that in those times, I've learnt some of the most profound things about myself and also about God, although not perhaps having the greatest consciousness of him at the time. The first flicker of light and hope in a dark time is for me one of my most powerful memories of God at work. And having experienced something of this almost 30 years ago, it meant that recently, when going through a very difficult and troubled time, I was twice able to identify that first light of God's grace almost as it appeared. And I drew tremendous strength and hope from it. What I learned in the past and my reflections on the past meant that I knew that I wasn't abandoned, I wasn't lost or hopeless, although these were some of the feelings that were starting to overwhelm me. We should never live in the past, but it's important that we have a healthy relationship with our past, both the good and the bad, the joys as well as the pain that we've endured. And sometimes it's only when we look back that we're able to see God's hand in those difficult or painful situations. The hand that lifted us out of the pit. The hand that provided enough light for us to begin to take steps out of the situation and that guided us. The hand that comforted us. And the hands that held us and wouldn't let us go. Saying good riddance not only dismisses our past, but it also dismisses God, who was there with us, though perhaps hidden from our consciousness at the time. Discovering that he was there and recognizing that he did care enriches our ongoing relationship with God and brings strength and comfort when we are again faced with pain and troubles.